Today on Facing Life Head On.
I kept telling him, honey, there's something I need to tell you. And then he said, oh, honey, don't worry about it. And then he started getting a little anxious, wanting to know, well, what is it? What's her secret?
One of the reasons they don't want to go to trial on this issue is, just like I explained to you the abortion breast cancer link, juries will get it.
Charnette Miche was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. The very next day, she found out she was pregnant. Now, fighting for her life and that of her baby, she wanted answers. Charnette wanted to know why she was at a higher risk for breast cancer. The answer startled her, and she wants to share it with other women. Charnette was living the American dream. 2 wonderful kids, her husband, a Navy physician in a beautiful Florida coastal town. But she's more than a wife and mother. Charnette's also a dancer, an actress, and an artist. She is so talented that the media predicted she'd win an Oscar. But when Charnette was diagnosed with breast cancer, her life was turned upside down. Where does your story begin?
My story begins in so many different places. It really does. I guess the most significant would be when I was actually told I may not see my daughter grow up.
And that's when you were diagnosed with your cancer?
Yes. It was basically, I had a mammogram, which I had to insist on because I was young, and my doctor thought because I was young, I didn't have breast cancer. So I insisted on a mammogram, and the radiologist was speaking to my husband and I in his office. And he said, highly suspicious malignancy with possible metastasis to my lymph nodes. And I looked at him because his face was just so glum, and he kept going on. And then he said usually 5-year survival rate. And I interrupted him and I said, wait a minute. I have a 3-year-old daughter at home. Am I going to get to see her grow up? And he looked at me and he looked at my mammogram, which was horrendous. And he said, possibly not.
You also had some very big news the following day. What was that?
Oh my goodness. After my cancer was confirmed, I learned I was pregnant. And I just knew, because I prayed. I said, God, give me the strength to tell the truth. And that truth would be when I was about 20 years old. I walked into an abortion facility and I had an abortion.
How hard was that to tell your husband?
Because my husband was a doctor and I would see military physicians most of the time, I would never say anything to them because I was too afraid that if it was in my medical record, my husband would find out, or that one of his colleagues would tell him or talk about it and he'd learn about it. And so I knew that I had to keep it quiet and never ever tell anybody, and never tell my husband, because I didn't want him to be disappointed in me.
But when she received the devastating news that she had advanced stage breast cancer, Charnette told her husband there was something else he needed to know.
I kept telling him, honey, there's something I need to tell you. And then he said, oh, honey, don't worry about it. And then he started getting a little anxious, wanting to know, well, what is it? What's her secret, And he had asked me long before in our marriage if I ever had an abortion. And I said, no, honey, I never had an abortion. So I'm sitting there on my bed, and he said in the hallway, he looked at me and I said, honey, there's really something I need to tell you. And he looked at me and he said, honey, did you have an abortion? And I looked at him and I said, yes. He came over to me and he sat down beside me on the bed and he put his arm around me. And he said, oh, honey, so many women are hurting from this. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that moment. And I fell in love with my husband even more in that moment.
When we return, we talk with national breast cancer expert Dr. Angela Lanfranchi, who explains why Charnette's abortion put her at a higher risk for cancer.
You just are leaving the breast with more places for cancers to start. So it's just a numbers game.
Earlier, we met Charnette Massey in her Florida home, happily married and the mother of two, including the son she gave birth to while battling cancer. Charnette is again facing advanced stage breast cancer and recently discovered the shocking news that the abortion she had 15 years before may have caused it. Our quest for answers took us to Dr. Angela Lanfranchi, a New Jersey breast surgeon and clinical assistant professor of surgery. She says 1 in 7 women are likely to get breast cancer, and women who abort a pregnancy are at an even higher risk.
So before a full-term pregnancy, 70% of your breast tissue is type 1 lobules. Well, the type 1 lobules are where 85% of all breast cancers start. So what happens is this. In the first 2 trimesters, you double in volume your breast type 1 and 2 lobules, and that's where cancers start. And then after 32 weeks, when you mature them to the type 3 are cancer resistant. So you have the abortion, the higher your risk, because what are you doing? You just are leaving the breast with more places for cancers to start. So it's just a numbers game.
How did you as a physician get to the point of being concerned about the link between abortion and breast cancer?
When I have patients come in and they fill out a history, I ask them the order of their pregnancy and the outcome of their pregnancy, and the age that they had that first pregnancy. And when I started doing that, it was around 94. And in the first 6 months I started, I had one patient with 7 pregnancies and 6 abortions, and another one with 5 pregnancies and 3 abortions. Both were in their 30s. And both ultimately died a few years after their diagnosis. And then in 1996, I heard a CNN report on the study that had come out. It was Dr. Joel Brin's meta-analysis that got published in the British Journal of Community Health and Epidemiology. That meta-analysis showed that the vast majority of studies had shown an abortion breast cancer link. And so I spoke with Dr. Brin, and we made a fact sheet with 52 references and had the biology, epidemiology, and I took it down to this meeting in Amelia Island in Florida.
Dr. Lanfranchi approached one of the keynote speakers, the director of risk assessment at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, a leading affiliate of Harvard Medical School.
And she tried some studies say yes, some studies say no, and I said, 8 statistically significant studies in our country and this meta-analysis, and here's my little paper. And she said, look, I know it's a risk. It's not a very big one. I know it's a risk. I consider it in my patients. But I don't choose to talk about it. So if you want to talk about it, you go right ahead and you do more research. I do not choose to talk about it. And I said, but I'm nobody and you're somebody. And she said, no, you should do it.
So together, Dr. Lanfranchi and colleague Dr. Joel Brin founded the Breast Cancer Prevention Institute to research risk factors like abortion.
We're talking about 267,000 cases a year of breast cancer in the United States. 5% of that is some 13,000 cases a year that are attributable to abortion. That means more than 1 case every hour of breast cancer in the United States is attributable to abortion.
If you had a family history of breast cancer and you had an abortion 18 or less, every single woman in that study with that situation got breast cancer by the age of 45. Now, out of 2,000 women, only 12 were in that category. And I've had patients in my own practice where they've had that history, and I've seen them, you know, in their late 40s, 50s, they didn't get breast cancer. But clearly that's a very strong risk.
Dr. Brind says study after study shows an abortion-breast cancer link.
Perhaps the best study that was done in the United States was published in 1989, and that was perhaps the best because it, rather than relying on women recalling their own reproductive history, their own medical history, to see whether or not they had an abortion, this relied on medical records of abortion, on New York State's fetal death registry, which actually takes records that were made at the time of the abortion so that women were positively identified by the record as to whether or not they had an abortion. So this is viewed as a much more ironclad kind of methodology when you rely on medical records rather than relying on recall and interview and that sort of thing. And that also showed a significant increase in the neighborhood of 90%, almost a twofold increase in the risk of getting breast cancer for women who had had an abortion.
Dr. Lanfranchi says the facts are there, and one landmark study in particular reveals the link.
And what the Russos did in 1980 is they had, if you want to do breast cancer research, you have a line of Sprague-Dawley rats that if you give them a particular chemical, in this case DMBA, they will reliably form breast cancer so that you can study them. That's the research model. And Irma Russo, when she bought her first set of rats, the dealer said, these are really good line of rats, they'll work really well, don't let them get pregnant. If you let them get pregnant first, the chemical doesn't work. And so Irma was like, you know, why would that be? So she studied it, and she had several groups of rats. She allowed one group of rats to get pregnant and have a litter of pups and then get the chemical. Another set of rats were aborted and then got the chemical. And the rats that had been aborted got breast cancers at a much higher rate than the ones that were allowed the protective effect of a full-term pregnancy. These rats had no political affiliations. You know, they didn't have an agenda.
But scientific studies like these are being hidden because some scholars believe it's too political an issue to touch.
When the National Cancer Institute had its February 2003 meeting of 100 scientists specifically to discuss reproductive risk factors, they came to the conclusion that abortion and breast cancer was so not linked that they shouldn't even study it anymore. But then they came to the pesky problem that they referred to as an epidemiologic gap of premature birth doubling breast cancer risk. Now, why would a premature birth before 32 weeks more than double breast cancer risk? Well, let's see. Is it because its physiology is exactly the same as an induced abortion?
Dr. Lanfranchi says that even though the National Cancer Institute isn't talking about the link, people are catching on.
People aren't stupid. And there have been so many abortions that everybody knows somebody who's in their 30s with breast cancer. A friend in the family, an office worker, somebody who's had that history, gotten breast cancer at a god-awful early age, don't have family history or other identifiable risk factors.
Do you think that the abortion industry is setting themselves up for class action lawsuits?
Well, there have been 2 cases in the United States, and the day that that jury was going to be picked, the malpractice carrier and the clinic settled. And I think one of the reasons they don't want to go to trial on this issue is Just like I explained to you the abortion breast cancer link, juries will get it.
When we return, Sharnette deals with the reality of cancer.
I don't want to be so graphic, but you know, I've lost my breast, I've lost my ovary, I've lost so many body parts. So how is that a quick fix, you know? It's not.
Whether you're a student needing answers, a parent needing help, or a concerned citizen wanting to make a difference, Life Issues Institute has the resources you need to put your values into action. Life Issues Institute is an international educational organization committed to protecting innocent human life. Life Issues Institute knows what it takes. That's why millions throughout the world turn here for help. Life Issues Institute has authored more pro-life publications than any other entity in the world, and its materials are printed in over 30 languages. Radio broadcasts, newsletters, and a website filled to the brim with the answers you're looking for are just a click away. Go to facinglife.tv and click on the link to Life Issues Institute to find out more about how you can change the heart of a nation.
Dr. Angela Lanfranchi says women who have abortions have a 30% greater risk of getting breast cancer. Sharnette Missé is one of them.
2 days ago, I learned that my cancer has metastasized. It's now in both of my lungs, and I'm fighting as hard as I can to spend as much time as I possibly can on earth with my children. My daughter is only 7, and I wish I could say I'm gonna know her when she's 35. So, but I have to take that, and I have to use the 7 years that I have with my daughter and the 3 years I've had with my son, and just know that that is, in a sense, my life, my fulfillment, my joy.
What advice do you have for women who say that abortion is a quick fix?
It's not. It is not. I don't want to be so graphic, but you know, I've lost my breast, I've lost my ovary, I've lost so many body parts. So how is that a quick fix, you know? It's not. You know, it's like you're standing online to have that abortion, you think it's a quick fix, but you don't picture your life 10 years down the road when you finally do have that home, when you finally do have that man you love, when you finally do have that child you want. Look at all that, in a sense, that I lost just because I made that one, in a sense, fatal decision.
Sharnette has set out to warn other women. She testified before the Senate in Maine and Massachusetts. She was featured on Oprah Winfrey's television show and in Rosie O'Donnell's magazine.
My goal is